the silo problem doesn't seem to go away, but that's because we tend to divide and conquer.
We have some clients that have fantastic performance and brilliant factories. One of the things that we do observe is that the leaders continue to lead, and in fact, they get faster, they get better faster, right? They innovate faster and pull away from the pack. So it is really interesting to see some of the leaders. There's a couple of common traits amongst those really leading operations is that they have that strong, engaged leadership. That is a leadership that is close to the workforce and close to the factory floor.
I think that's a good point, because you have to have a mix of both, right? Because it goes back to what Henry Ford said before. If you ask people what they wanted, they tell you a faster horse, right? Before they did that. So somebody has to look for innovation, but we also have to take the feedback and the problems directly from the factory floor. Hello, everybody, and welcome again to this episode of Practitioners Unplugged podcast, where we dive into real-world stories and strategies to manufacturing digital transformation. Join us to hear from thought leaders or innovators who are driving change and shaping the future of Industrial 4.0. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just curious about the future of manufacturing, this podcast is for you. Today on episode 13, we're honored to have with us Ed Koch, and I'll turn it over to Shri, who has a long-standing relationship with Ed, to do further introduction. Shri, take it away.
Thanks, Dante. Really excited to have Ed on this episode. I had the pleasure of meeting Ed back in 2015 when Aviva did a conceptual design for the Brewery of the Future in South Africa for SAB Miller, and Ed was leading that project. The Brewery of the Future had a vision for a future workforce and a new way of working. I think I embraced the new world of work and the new way of working terminology since that experience. And then in 2018, after Ed left SAB Miller, I reconnected with him and we did a fun exercise. We documented our thoughts and ideas on how to think about the new world of work. And now, almost 8 years later, I'm reconnecting with Ed to repeat this exercise, talk about this new way, new world of work, new ways of working, possibly even update some of our material. I think because when we had the discussion, AI wasn't as prevalent. I think AI is the big thing since then and how it's taking shape. So really value Ed's perspective of the worker of the future, because of the journey that Ed has been part of, going through SAB Miller, and we'll get into some of these experiences, especially, working in different continents, working for multinational companies. So with that, Ed, again, pleasure to have you. Maybe you can start with a quick introduction of yourself on the company, role, etc., and we can go from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Shri and Dante. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to just connecting and talking around all things operations and manufacturing. My background is over 20 years now in operations and lean manufacturing, really, and working through consumer goods and at Unilever, beverages in SAB Miller and AB InBev, and most recently for Competitive Capabilities International, we are lean consultants that have a digital product and work with some really big brands around the world, and a great pleasure to do that. So it's good to be here, and thank you very much.
Excellent. So when I look at your career trajectory, I think we should start with part one of your career. 20 years in South Africa, first working for Unilever and then for SAB Miller. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think that was, your formative experiences, and especially, given the environment in South Africa, because you have to be somewhat resourceful and resilient. Being an island, almost, unto itself.
Yes, and I mean it's a great question, because I think one of the things that we really aspired to in South Africa is often we're working with people who were relatively low skilled in terms of formal education, but operational excellence, and we also based it on principles out of the original Toyota production system and JRPM and so on. Really offered a way to build people's capability in the workplace in a real meaningful way, that allowed people to contribute more to their work, and make a real difference in the workplace, solve real problems that they face day to day, and most importantly, is improve the performance of their work environment, whether that was on a packing floor or a team that they worked with, or more broadly across the factory. So I think building the capability of individuals and teams was fundamental to what we were trying to do in those operations in Unilever and SAB Miller.
So, Ed, the other thing that struck me was you have rotated through a number of different roles. Is that also part of the working culture in South Africa, or there was?
Well, I think it was, I think it was also deliberate within those organizations to get, I guess, rounded experience around operations. So both from engineering perspective, understanding the technical aspects of factories and operations, the processes, as well as operations and production management, and working with teams of people across usually 24/7, multiple shifts, and the complexities that brings, and of course really working to try and get out the best out of those people and individuals to perform as best as they can in their respective roles.
So one of the things that really impressed me when I started to prepare for the Brewery of the Future project was reading through SAB Miller's The Manufacturing Way. The fact that there was, a blueprint that codified something you could share, you could build strategic capabilities around. And if I recall, the Manufacturing Way was one of 8 such capabilities. There was a marketing way, there was an HR way. So let's actually delve into this and unpack this, because I think I want to, get to the heart of what is a way and why it's so critical to operational excellence. And, remember that book, Good to Great? I forget the name of the author.
Jim Collins, is it?
Jim Collins, yeah. They always talked about some kind of a cohesive philosophy that drove those companies to be great.
Yeah, so I mean, the concept behind ways, and many businesses have a production system, but for us back then at SAB Miller, what the business was in a real growth mode. It was highly acquisitive. We were buying businesses around the world and integrating them into the organization. And through this process, the ways were really, I guess, a single credible point of reference in how we operate, how we run the business, how we believed was the best way to run our operations, market our brands, build the strength of our people, manage performance, and so on. So the idea behind Ways was as we were growing and integrating various organizations, various new organizations across the world, this provided a mechanism to transfer that knowledge, so that people started operating off the same hymn sheet and in the same way. And also, it was really beneficial for the people coming into the organization to understand how do things work around here? How do I integrate quickly? How do I build a career for myself in this business? What are the things that are considered important? So and the other thing, I think talking about a way is it was really based around principles. The intention was to consider that the local context would vary. We operated from Latin America, North America, all across Europe, Asia, Africa, West Africa, and those contexts are very different. But the principles around operations remain the same. What are the levers that drive good performance? How the value that people bring into their daily operations. So we weren't trying to create books of processes. We were trying to create habits, a way of working every day that was effective.
So, Ed, I see a lot of. Oh yeah, I was going to say I see a lot of parallels to kind of Schneider's transformational story too, because again, Schneider grows by mergers and acquisition all the time too. So integrating different cultures, different systems of processes. How important do you feel that initial initiative that you did by like standardizing and simplify has laid the groundwork to being able to accelerate more of a digital transformation journey at the later? I know we're not there yet, but I think this is a critical point that a lot of people miss, is that a lot of bigger companies are growing by the same thing, but sometimes they maintain the status quo or allow the plants to operate how they did. And I see it as kind of like preventing the company from actually achieving its goals. So can you just unpack that for a little bit about the importance of that manufacturing way or that standard operating procedure and how that moves you forward?
Yeah, that's a really great point, Dante, and I agree. It is so important and so valuable that you do have that consistent way of operating. I think if you create that standard way of operating around the world, it also creates a common language of people being able to talk to common processes and standard methodologies, and it allows us also to share best practice very effectively, because you're sharing off a common base. But when you start thinking then about digitizing and using digital tools, digital systems, and so on, you want to make sure that the processes and systems that you have in place, the fundamental building blocks, are good ones, and that they're not disparate, because that'll create enormous complexity in the business, and probably adds to drag in trying to execute those systems. So I think it is really, really important that people are working off a common base and a standard way of working.
Yeah, the behaviors are the proof of the pudding. But I have to say, as an outsider coming in and just going through the documents, the documentation of the manufacturing way was so impressive. Again, the goal wasn't to create a set of documents that sat on the shelf. But I was struck by how thoroughly documented it was. Somebody going through that process had a good understanding of what was expected, from those behaviors. And this particular episode, I really want to unpack this idea of the way, because we seem to be going through a transitional period where the careers are short. We seem to go through different companies because of M&A, because of technological turmoil, etc. And we're being encouraged to be free agents as opposed to be part of a broader culture. And the other thing is that, it's funny when I look at, the era of automation and now the era of AI, I can't help but feel that there's this underlying subtext that people are expendable.
Well,
and they, yeah.
Sorry, yes, I think you raised some great points there. I think one of the things is that we the benefits of these ways and these common ways of working is it's about building real capability in areas of strategic importance. So you don't need to necessarily do it across all avenues of the business, but to be a really successful and high performing business, there are what is your USP? What are the areas that you need to be really good at, and build the capability in those areas. And the aspiration really is to leverage your skills and scale those. So then the question comes, well, what is a capability? What do we mean by a capability? And our view is that it was a combination of several things. I think, first of all, there's the organization. So how is the organization structured? The roles, the skills that you want, and need to make that effective. But then also the second area is around the processes, the tools, the systems that are used, and these are, all the standard methodologies that we would have in an operational system. I think what's really, really important then we found is a measurement system. So how do you know that you're progressing in this area of strategic importance? What are the metrics? How are you going to measure progress? And how are you going to know if you're on the right track? And then finally, I think there's a set of enablers around things like management routines, the way leaders lead. The symbols, the stories they tell of successes that create that excitement and generate that passion through the business. So I think when we look at a capability that we want to make a business really successful, identify those areas that are of strategic importance. And think through those things. What is the organization we need to do? What to do this? Processes. How do we measure success? And what are the management routines to make sure that we lock this into a standard way of working?
So I want to dive in just a little bit further on that. So one of the things you said is, okay, we get this manufacturing way set and established. We figure out how we're going to operate. How do you close that loop to make sure that, one, that methodology is being followed, and two, is that manufacturing methodology a static document, or does it evolve as time changes, people change, and technology change?
Yeah, I think great points, Dante. I think the on the first one is, I think there's several ways that we found to try and lock it in. The first one is, leadership is critical. Leadership at all levels, from a senior leadership above site level through to your site leaders and your frontline leaders, have to really reinforce the right behaviors and hold people accountable to ensuring that they apply the standards and the processes. So that point, Sri, that you raised around, people being free agents, sometimes there need to be tough discussions about saying, well, look, we operate in a certain way here, and that is actually not acceptable and not the way that we work. So I think there needs to be that level of accountability. In terms of your question around does it evolve? Yeah, most definitely. I think I remember with our manufacturing way, we started off with a core set of processes, but later on, and in fact, it was just around this time of building this new world of work and designing this brewery of the future, we codified a set of practices around digital OT, right? That we wanted standardized across the business, and that was now 10 years ago, but we felt that was an important addition to the overall operating system. So, and then the other way that we ensured that it was locked in is we measured on kind of two axes, if you want. We measured the execution of practices and processes through assessment, but then also performance. So really asking the question: A, are the practices and processes being executed and lived? And B, are they delivering the performance that we expect? And that was very insightful, because if there was a mismatch, if there was you've got great practices in place, but you're not delivering the performance, there's questions around that, and vice versa.
So on the topic of what evolves and what doesn't, so let me see if I can paint a visual picture here. So if I think of the way as a Bible, right? And there are 4 parts to this, or 4 sections that are, interconnected. So the first section is the overarching principles. And the principles then, influence the second chapter, which is organizational design. And that influences competencies and capabilities, and that defines the work practices. So those are the 4 sort of major sections. I would like to think that your overarching principles shouldn't change much. I mean, I feel like that's your compass as a company, right? That defines why we do the things we do and the way we do it. Right? And then organizational design, well, okay, how I set things up and operate in Latin America, one geo versus another, I have some flexibility there, that I need to adapt. So does that make sense that, that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The principles are, I mean, you're right, are enduring. I mean, if you think of ultimately supply chains are governed by business rules. We need to grow the business. Operating margin is something that will always receive attention. We need to manage our inventory turns and our return on invested capital. So those principles around the business rules of supply chain are critical and enduring. Continuous improvement is another principle. We say excellence is only achieved through deliberate focus on continuous improvement, organizational learning, and I think another principle that we adhere to that is really enduring is around a team-based organization. So, manufacturing is a team sport, and operations are a team sport. So that team-based organization that allows for close collaboration and sustained adoption of best practices is also critical.
So a quick tangent here. In the virtual value chain structure, could I say that one of my principles is I am serious about manufacturing as an area of excellence, because I could be, let's say, NVIDIA, where I don't manufacture the chips, but I design. But really, the excellence in manufacturing is done with a partner like TSMC.
Yes, and the principles would apply similarly, in whether it's in a service industry or in an R&D environment, as you've described there, or manufacturing. So there are enduring principles around also being able to measure your work, improve the performance, and build the capability of the teams. So I think that's correct. I'd agree with that, Sri. Yeah.
So an NVIDIA still may have a manufacturing way, but the design way is far more extensive. And the manufacturing way may be the rules of engagement around how well I collaborate with my foundry, right, to make the chip.
Yes, correct. Yeah, and there would also be in the R&D environment, there would be also considerations around people-centered design, and how do we engage our customers in the design process, understand the customer needs, and the whole area of iterative design, rapid prototyping, and so on. So there may be a different execution in terms of a way, in that environment.
So if I look at, whether it's the 4 chapters of a Bible or 4 layers of a cake, then I can look at something like AI, and AI might impact work practices a lot more than my principles. Because if my principles say that I'm a people-centric organization, the most important asset on the plant floor is the human, a problem solver, right? So I have something to anchor that culture, but then I don't necessarily I see AI as something complementing how I do my work, as sort of like, how do I try to bring costs down? And
yes,
automation, AI free for all.
And you could also argue with the advent of AI, is that does it start to affect the organization design, in the sense that that is an additional support for the team that they can draw on, providing. If you're thinking of a factory environment, providing deeper insights into the performance of the equipment, performance of the materials, the raw materials coming out, how equipment and materials interact. So the level of insight that you're then able to get, and almost recommended action, provides a huge benefit to the team as well. So most definitely, and I think that then becomes a new skill for the team, a new competence, that they need to build in being able to leverage that AI expertise.
Yeah. And Dante, if we take this back to the Schneider factories, right? The ability to embrace AI, if I think of a lighthouse factory that has all the sensors, it is collecting the data. I mean, AI is a very data-hungry technology, versus an older site that is a lot more, let's say, semi-automated, manual. As much as you aspire for AI, there's some real limitations as to what you can do.
It predominantly comes down to like the structures that you have in place, the ability to organize and contextualize that data, but then how it's leveraged is not really meant to replace people. It's just to enhance decision-making processes, right? And that's the key to it. How do we leverage AI to reduce unplanned downtime? How do we do it to right-size our supply chain, right? So we're not carrying excess inventory, or we're doing demand forecasting and taking into like macroeconomic trends and weather data into shipments going on. How do we readjust? And that impacts everything downstream of that. But all that like data crunching from a traditional human perspective is very, very arduous. So we're leveraging a lot the technology really just to enhance that decision making. We're not looking at it as, hey, we're going to replace. How do we drive efficiency? Back to Ed's previous comment, everything's about, okay, 1% improvements, continuous improvement methodology. And this really is that next step level change, where we go from making, 1% improvements day over day, where we're, driving continuous improvement methodologies, because there's only so much you can enhance internally to get like 1% better every day. It's technology that's really going to give you that step function change in your operating model and philosophy. And I think we're just hitting that next avenue now, where AI is going to give us that step function improvement where we're going away from like these incremental gains. I think that's kind of what I see as a difference. Now that there's another challenge there, which is really around, we talked about the new ways of working, which is the initial like automation, standardizing procedures, and there's some complications that come with that. And this is what I want to talk to you about, Ed, is really on, you had mentioned those two functions of performance and adherence to that standardization. You also talked about the leadership component, but I want to go a little bit more granular as far as the people stuff, because a lot of the resistance to change, usually the resistance from the people that we've done this way for 40 years, we're not changing it. So how do you change kind of that mindset downstream to embrace those changes? And then when we talk, like to Shree's point, which is AI, which is totally foreign to how we've ever done stuff, how do we manage that incremental change so that we're not putting too much on the workforce or dramatically changing too much of what they're doing at one time where things combust and break down?
Yeah. No, I think it is a challenge, and there is change is hard for all of us. Change is difficult, but I think also too people respond to change when they're able to co-create it. So I think that's quite a key factor in trying to drive change within manufacturing environments. So really involving teams in that change. Now, particularly with, and I think this is particularly important with AI, because there is a lot of I guess, let's be honest, fear around, this is going to take away my job or minimize my job in some way. So I think that involvement helps to educate people and enables them to identify the opportunities that could be used for greater insights, the insights that you spoke about. And I think the second big driver of change is when people can really see the benefits for me. How's this going to affect my day-to-day life? How's it going to make it easier for me? And we learn things when we need to learn things. So it's the classic problem when you have to fix something around the house and you pull out YouTube and watch a YouTube video, right? How am I going to repair that door handle or whatever it may be? But creating that pull for learning is important. So I think, and this I believe is where measurement is so important, because we spoke about the step change that is coming in terms of supply chain performance. And if we can use measurement effectively to set new goals, set new standards that people can aspire to, they can leverage the new technologies like AI, the digital and data fluency that is needed to really try and drive that improvement. So. I think I think change is challenging, and it remains challenging. But I think if we follow those principles of getting people involved in co-creating the change and making sure that there is real benefit in their day-to-day lives. I think even. I was when I first started getting involved in implementing TPM and quality control at source. That was a big change for people. I remember this was now 25 years ago in implementing quality at source. So previously we had quality control people that used to come at the end of the line and inspect the quality, and the operators kind of had nothing to do with quality. And we shifted that, and we said, no, operators are going to start now doing their own quality inspections and their own quality checks. But it was it was the same process of getting people to understand the importance and the value that it could bring, and also how it grew them as individuals, because it forced them to then understand, oh, I understand now the impact my machine has on my product quality, and I can then make adjustments in that area, and so on and so forth. So it grows people's grows people's roles, it grows people's ability to contribute to the organization.
If I can build on that, because I distinctly remember when we were interviewing, the various people as part of the New World of Work Brewery of the Future project, and basically said, look, I need a system that helps people find a problem and fix a problem, because that finding to fixing the problem is so fragmented, and we tend to throw things over the wall. But articulating the idea that, what I have is, a set of problem solvers, right? My factory workers are problem solvers, their ability to find and fix problems, and also then classifying problems as, is this a situational problem? I just get things back on track. Is it a systemic problem? Oh, I need to do some root cause analysis. So it was, having that well laid out to where you could actually connect the dots between cause and effect. And that, to me, like, it seemed like the heart of a learning organization and a learning structure, that's encapsulated there.
Yeah, I think this is a good. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ed.
Oh no, I was just saying that. I mean, no, I agree. I mean, I think the problem solving is so fundamental to operations, and what we have now is a whole new set of tools and insights and data available at people's fingertips. Yes, it means they have to learn new skills, but it also gives them great new opportunities as well,
Yeah, and this is what I wanted to kind of jump on now, because we talked a little bit about the analog, which is standardizing those processes, but we haven't really talked about how, like, the digital aspect of that really transforms the frequency of information and the decision making onto the floor. So can you talk a little bit about, since we talked about these fundamentals 20 years ago, technology has changed substantially between then. Once we start to digitize, we talk about those performance metrics. Shri kind of talked about that concept of, those actionable insights coming back and making decisions. Like, how has the digital acumen and real-time information really changed how that operating model is, and understanding in real time whether you made good decisions, bad decisions, and what's that layer of management look like on driving that from more of a real-time perspective than traditional whiteboards, erase, problem, erase, moving into this digital Pareto and historized data collection?
Yeah, so one of the observations I see, around factories and looking at clients, is I do still think we're lagging in the expertise. So operators and around in factories are lagging in terms of data fluency and understanding. And being able to respond to those insights fast. So there is I still think some work to do in terms of competence and capability building. The other side of it, though, is there's this question around the more sort of traditional analog and use of data on boards versus digital, and we quite honestly adopt a sort of a hybrid approach. What is most pragmatic? I think there is the great benefit about digital is that it provides the instantaneous real-time information that enables that ongoing decision making. But sometimes all of these inputs, it's actually faster to get a team of people around a board and solve a problem than to use fancy digital tools. And can give an example of if you're looking to try and understand, so why did a particular pump fail, or in a piece of in a factory, or a motor, you'll have a lot of digital data around its performance. You'll have maybe oil analysis that was done, but you'll also have the operator that was on the line that saw, that was observing the motor, and to gather those people together with the digital information, with the observations of people, and have a real fast discussion and brainstorm. That team is quite powerful. So the combination of the digital data and getting people problem solving around issues, I think is very, very powerful.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I've seen that in practice, especially within the Schneider facilities, that the goal is really to capture on the digital systems the issues and the impact to your operations, right? And then it's a cross-functional team that together visualizes that and says, okay, this is a real problem, right? We've lost 500 hours of operating times because of this failure. Let's figure it out. Well, who does that impact? That impacts quality, that impacts engineering, automation, and operations, and plant management. And together they come down and come with a collective plan or a strategy because it impacts all. So can engineering solve a problem for both quality and operations to prevent this from happening? And that's where, bringing those support functions together, armed with, the evidence that we should be investing our time into this, is really what the digital aspect of that, I think, comes. It makes it very clear where to focus, because we have a lot of fires in a manufacturing facility. But if we're just doing it on a whiteboard every day, we don't really understand the impact of this issue is causing to production. So I think the digital gives us like that clear line of sight of where to focus those efforts and how to collectively solve that.
Yeah, agreed, and much faster at a much higher rate as well. So that's which is great, So that's something. Often, I'm thinking years ago, it may have taken you months to really try and identify that issue. Yeah.
Yeah, the accountability also is key, right? So, okay, who is this assigned to? When do they commit to getting it done? And where are they in that process, right? So that goes back to that leadership transparency. Okay, this is a known issue. Shree's working on it. Shree committed to getting this done within a week. It's been 2. I call Shree, what's going on? Why haven't you fixed this, right? And that's what keeps it going. Yeah. I think if we just put this in a spreadsheet, it gets lost, and the fire of the day is what we're focused on.
Yeah, so one other dimension that stood out to me in the manufacturing way was the maturity model. If I remember, there were 10 areas that SAB Miller looked at, and you had defined stages of maturity. And something we hear often is, we would really like a crawl, walk, run approach to the way we transform, right? And so that you could actually, first figure out where am I, and then be able to envision, I should be able to, my way of working for this stage of maturity looks like this for this type of capability.
Yeah, and that maturity model, I mean, it was hugely valuable. These maturity models are hugely valuable. I think several things about it, though, is it does allow for this common language. Particularly in a multi-site organization, large organizations. I mean, we'd had 120 facilities around the world. And it allowed us to see how all those facilities were both performing in terms of a defined set of metrics, but also how mature they were in terms of their work practices. And that enabled really great internal benchmarking and And then that in turn drove shared learning. So, the people who were lagging could learn from the leaders and so on. The other thing about the maturity model, and this goes to Dante, to your earlier comment about it does need to be updated. Things as technology evolves, as your learning evolves, the maturity model should change. What was kind of what was leading 5 years ago now is now sort of maybe middle of the road. And what was middle of the road is now baseline, sort of thing. So you do need to just be I think adjust that and recalibrate the maturity model, but it does provide a huge amount of value in terms of driving performance and driving a common way of working and a common language across the business.
So quick question on that. Oh, sorry. I was just this is more around, okay, so we talk about that maturity model. Is that defined by a central function? And then how do you go out and actually assess that? Is that done by the plants? Do they do self-assessments? Do you do a corporate assessment and compare the results? Because everybody's going to self-report that they're great, but how do you make sure that, like, what's the checks and balance look like?
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, spot on. It's quite interesting. We found a combination. So the way we did it is, and I can talk about some other experiences. Is it was initially a self-assessment, but that was done twice a year, aligned to the business cycle. But what we layered over that was regional sort of calibration that was done across 1/3 of the operations each year. So over a 3-year cycle, every facility was calibrated, and then we also had some checkpoints where if a facility was rated very highly, they would get an external assessment at a corporate level. What we found, though, is that you did get two sides of the coin. We got people that underrated themselves, so were really harsh on themselves, and were probably better than they thought they were. And of course, the reverse was true. So others rated themselves very highly. The other thing was that sometimes it took a number of cycles for the businesses to really learn what good looked like. So, and that was supported through through corporate coaching and cross-functional assessment. So that was the way that it was managed. I have seen it, though, done entirely externally by an external team that come in and audit, every facility, which is which I guess has the benefit of providing consistency, but is also costly in terms of you need an audit team around a big business flying around and doing that. So maybe not a sustainable way to do it. And I think the other thing that you lose through that is the wider learning. So by getting one facility to cross audit another facility, they actually immediately learn from each other, because they see, oh, hang on, these guys are really, really good at their quality processes. For example, we can learn from that and take that back to our facility. So.
And I think that's key, right? So one of the things is nobody likes, hey, I'm from corporate, I'm here to help mentality. Yeah. So learning from those other plants, and Schneider's done a good job of this within their supply chain, is they actually give away a copy and steal award. So a lot of people, if you were down as a plant, let's say you're immature in a certain category within that assessment criteria, and you went to another regional plant to learn, adopted that, then you got the copy and steal award. So it's always been celebrated. Yeah. Some organizations kind of, they want to compete with different regions, different plants, and they kind of isolate, like, hey, this is my baby, you're not learning it. But I think that's more of a cultural thing that kind of needs to change for companies to evolve.
Yeah. Well, that's a great idea. I'll take that one.
So I'm mindful of the time. So if I were to, let's say, do a checkpoint here, and the key takeaway here is that because when I look at what Schneider is doing and all the hands-on experiences that you have had, let me make a statement that the vision for the future manufacturing worker will be shaped by companies that actually see manufacturing as a core competence. And that competency has actually manifested and matured as a way of working. I think those are like the hallmarks, right? Because there's a lot of conversations around, future factory worker, but I think some voices are more important than others. And it's those voices where manufacturing is seen as a core competence. Now, there might be other models too, but I think what we care about is those companies that see that. So, switching gears, so you have the benefit of 20 plus years of knowledge, and since leaving SAB Miller, you've done a bunch of things. You're with competitive capabilities, international CCI. Any thoughts on what you've seen out there? Because you know what excellence looks like. You're going out there and engaging with a broader audience.
The interesting thing is, and we have, it is great to see. We have some clients that are that have fantastic performance and brilliant factories. One of the things that we do observe is that the leaders continue to lead and in fact get faster, get better faster. Right, so they innovate faster and pull away from the pack. So it is really interesting to see some of the leaders. One of the there's a couple of my observation, a couple of common traits around amongst those really leading operations is that they do have that strong engaged leadership. That is a leadership that is close to the workforce and close to the factory floor. So not divorced or separated from it. A very well trained manufacturing people, as you just said, manufacturing technicians and operators, and there's almost a how can I say a restlessness, a hunger to find new ways to perform better. So that constant chipping away at improvement that comes from the people, and those and that really leads to that step change in those organizations.
So another follow-up question to that: of those leaders, what percentage of them do you think have kind of have laid that foundation of the manufacturing wave first before they ever went the digital route? How important do you see that, standardized manufacturing philosophy across the organization as like a paramount to scaling and continuing to advance?
Yes, in all the cases, it is getting that standard manufacturing way or production system really well embedded. The other thing maybe to add on to that is that I think in all the cases that you see them embrace technology, embrace new ways of working, digital, AI, because they're seen as levers to faster improvement and faster performance improvement.
And then it's really right that the entire culture is around that. So what percentage of like the innovation comes from the shop floor versus being pushed top down?
It's quite difficult to put a number on it, but I would say a considerable amount comes from the shop. It comes from the shop floor. So I don't know, maybe about 40%, and then another 40% from specialists and tech, technical specialists in the business. Yeah.
I think it's a good point, because you have to have a mix of both, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to what Henry Ford said before. If you ask people what they wanted, they tell you a faster horse, right?
Yeah,
before they did that. So somebody has to look for innovation, but we also have to take the feedback and the problems directly from the factory floor.
Yeah, for sure.
So this actually reminds me of the fun exercise we did 8 years ago. So in defining the new world of work, new ways of working, we put ideas into 3 buckets. The first bucket was ideas that are obsolete and should be stop doing these things. Right? Then the second bucket was ideas they're still good, right? Keep doing these things. And the third bucket was ideas to explore and experiment. And I think that if I look at the ideas, stop doing those things was, I think it's worth, this divide and conquer, right? This is an age-old problem. The silo problem doesn't seem to go away, right? But that's because we tend to divide and conquer. Then I think in the bucket of things that keep doing, the lean approach, continuous improvement, all those, good ideas. And some of this was, again, like the AI conversation is taking up so much oxygen. Trying to, bring this back to a more, level playing field. So 10 years ago when you laid out the vision for Brewery of the Future, you introduced the concept of a master manufacturing technician. It was this, it was the name you had given for the problem solver, right? Do you see more of that profile emerging out there?
Yes, I do. I think it was the way we started looking at that is we said, when you build a brewery, it's at that time be around for 30, 40, 50 years, right? So, and we were building breweries at that time, and we asked ourselves, if we design this brewery of the future with all the latest processes, the latest tech, and all the right kit, what would a day in the life of an operator look like? What would they, and if they were able to leverage all the digital tools that were available, what would a day in the life of an operator look like? And when you start mapping that out, you very quickly realize it's a big job. It's not a straightforward, simple job. It's we're asking these days our frontline operators to do so much. They have to run the equipment. They are responsible for the quality of the coming off the lines. There's basic maintenance that they do. They're tracking performance. They're having to in some cases develop their team members, learning new skills. So there's a lot that we ask of them, and it's such a critical, fundamental job that because these are the people that really add the value to the product. These are the people that make the difference in the business, and so really, I mean, we came up with a term of a master manufacturing technician, but that was the idea that if we were able to leverage all the capability that we had on our fingertips, what would the skills and competencies need to be of that person running the factory at 3 a.m. in the morning?
So that idea has, it's been stuck in my head since the time you introduced it, and to put it in contemporary pop culture, for Star Wars fans who've seen The Mandalorian, right? What does The Mandalorian say?
This is the way.
This
I say
is
it to
the
my
way.
kids all the time.
This is the way, right? And if you look at all the gear and, the Mandalorian is a man within a suit with a lot of capabilities, right? And there's a model there in terms of what that future manufacturing worker needs to look like, as opposed to how Henry Ford envisioned it 100 years ago, right? So, but I do think that way, just like how the Toyota method has been adopted by many, many companies, there is a way that is, 2/3 of that way may be common to, just operational excellence in manufacturing. Right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it goes back to, what we were saying earlier around the fundamentals, the principles are still relevant. But we've got all these great tools that can just improve the way that we execute these days. So,
going back to that question of the toys, I think that's part of the other problem that a lot of people see, is that there's so much out there. So really, how do you leverage those foundations to select the right technology, to make the right decisions? How do I know that, this is what I want? Because if you just, again, if you leave it to the independent factories to figure out their own problems, you're going to have, if you have 150 plants, you'll have 150 different ways of accomplishing the same problem. So how do you really, how do you look at that innovation? Who decides that? How do you make sure it scales and it's repeatable?
Yeah, that is a great, that is a problem. And you get into this perpetual piloting and innovation kind of process, but there does need to be governance around it at the end of the day. I mean, I think a lot of good ideas can get generated and bubbled up from each of the operations, but there does need to be oversight around the investments that you're going to make in order to leverage the best benefit for the business. And at the end of the day, it does boil down to one of those key metrics for a supply chain is return on invested capital. So making sure that you make the right innovations in the right way and in the right places remains critical.
So Ed, we've spent an hour, and I feel like I've only scratched the surface here. So I would encourage our audience to reach out and connect with Ed. There's a lot more inside this person's head that you can benefit from. Maybe we can close with a plug for CCI and what you guys do and how you can help.
Certainly, thanks very much, Sri. So so CCI, we provide a really systemized way of implementing lean best practices. We have a digital product, and alongside that, we have very experienced coaches. I think our USP is really that we are able to work very closely at the front line, right down at the shop floor. And the coaches that we use are deeply experienced in that. They've all been there and done that. They've all run operations, been ex-factory leaders, and understand what they are talking about. So yes, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we'd love to work with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ed. And thanks again, everybody, for tuning into this episode of Practitioners Unplugged. We hope you thought this discussion was as insightful and beneficial as we did. Until next time, please like, subscribe, and tell us where you want to go with that. And Ed, thanks again for your generous time today. Have a good day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.